Well, it's time for our third episode in a week when it comes to championship predictions, because the midweek fixtures have started, and straight off the back of that, we've got another full weekend fixture list. So today, we're going to run through match day 8 and give our predictions for all 12 scores this weekend. But you can let me know yours down in the comments as always, and if you beat me or match my score, you'll get a shout out in a recap in the next episode. Speaking of that, before we go and get into this weekend's fixtures, let's have a look back at midweek and see how we all got on. And we'll start with mine, where I think you can see the frustration. A sea of green, but unfortunately, no perfect scores for the gold. Millwall got a late third to thwart me, and if I'd got that, I would have jumped from, well, joint 4th to 2nd in the championship predictions this midweek. I picked up 7 points overall, all for correct outcomes, but that perfect score eluded me. For you guys, 3 of you matched me, 3 of you beat me, so well done to all of you. Regulars Mello, Steve and Darren all got 7 points level with me, but Darren did pick up a perfect score as well. Chris and Stuart, 2 of the regulars, got 8 to pick me by a point, both got a perfect score in there as well. And David, a newcomer to the championship predictions in our comments, he comes in with a win on his first attempt, 10 points, a super effort, and brilliant work from you. 2 perfect scores doing you a good job early on in that match day. With that out of the way, let's go and move on to match day 8. Generally, I've been a bit better at the weekends, and I've tried to balance it out, because I said last season normally we got an average of less goals per game during midweek. Well, that didn't happen last time out. So let's bring that aggregate down a bit this weekend. It's a tired end of the week of 3 games for the first time this season. And we start remarkably on Friday night with Birmingham City versus Queen's Park Rangers. Now, I'm not really sure what to expect from this one, because QPR had looked good for a couple of games, played really well away at Borough, albeit didn't offer a huge amount going forward throughout. But aside from that, it is now 3 defeats and a draw in the other 4 of the 5 recent games. Okay, they came back and got a very late point against Swansea, which in the end will have been a good result from where they were. You've just not got that raucous fall off this road that you used to seeing. And I really thought against Swansea they'd be able to find the goods. And while there's a good gap there to the bottom 3 still, it wasn't the best performance in the world, and it certainly wasn't the most convincing. It was a very even game. Probably would have been cruel if QPR didn't get something out of it. You can't really make a case for them winning that one. For Birmingham, though, after a brilliant start, they were, with Preston, the only unbeaten side a couple of games ago. It is back-to-back defeats away from home. It is dropping out of the playoffs into 8th place. And it's 4 goals conceded in 2 games when they'd only let in 3 in the previous 5 before that. So a little bit of a worry, albeit away at Preston is not the easiest game in the world. Jay Stansfield giving them the lead. He's looking really good this season. Definitely a positive early on. And they did create a number of chances. It was again a fairly even game this midweek. But Preston just had that efficiency at the top, which leaves Birmingham searching for home comforts. Now, they drew at home to Millwall in their last home league game. They beat Plymouth the one before that, but again, relied on a very late goal against Stansfield on that occasion. And I just wonder if it's going to be the late show again. I can see this being a very tight and cagey game. QPR perhaps coming to try not to lose, because they need to start picking up points. And for Birmingham, it's always fairly compact when they're at their best. So I'm going to start as I did in the last episode. I got it shockingly wrong in that one. I'm going for 1-0 to the home side. I feel Birmingham will just pip it. Maybe it'll come late on as well. Let's move on to Saturday though, where all 9 games are 3 PM kickoffs. The first of them, an interesting one between high-flying Ipswich Town and Blackburn Rovers, who lost again, this time at home to Sunderland. That's 2 in 3 for them, and in both of those defeats, they conceded 3 goals as well. Definitely cause for concern. And while they did beat Borough 2-1 in between, they gave up a lot of chances in that game. There are definitely some defensive deficiencies. We talked earlier in the summer about Blackburn losing a lot of players. The goalkeeper Kaminsky to Luton, a couple of defenders, young quality ones too. Brereton Diaz obviously goes without mention too, and it is hitting them at both ends of the pitch. Against Sunderland, again, they created loads of chances without taking them. And they gave up goals from nearly every chance against. They look like conceding. If they can't find the back of the net with the sort of chances they had against Plymouth and Sunderland, they're going to be in trouble this year. And defensively, if you're not going to be putting your chances away, you've got to be rock solid. And Blackburn are neither of those things at the minute. For Ipswich, a really good 1-0 win away at Southampton. Very different type of performances. It's probably a rare game where they're going to have to sacrifice a lot of the ball. it was fairly even, but Ipswich just shaded it and they took advantage of a brittle confidence at Southampton and the St Mary's. So 3 wins in succession for them, all by the odd goal. And there is going to be a day where that eventually comes back to bite them. I don't think it's going to be this one. If Blackburn have a day where they take their chances, they're going to do what they did to Harrogate in the Cup and they're just going to batter someone. But at the moment, they're conceding too many good chances and too many goals from it. So I'm going to go for a comfortable Ipswich win. I think they'll continue their good start with a 3-1 win at Portman Road. And I can see Blackburn heading into the bottom half this weekend. Let's go and move on to Ellen Road, where Leeds United host Watford. Watford in what was a crazy first 25 minutes against West Brom. 1-0 up, 2-1 down and back to 2-2. A very good start to the game, which perhaps wasn't matched by the last hour. But again, there wasn't a huge amount for either side. We're seeing a pattern this season with Watford at home. A lot of the ball, not really able to grind teams down when they're defensively solid. And they're lucky probably that West Brom just didn't come out the traps. For Leeds United, a draw, but in very different circumstances. A game away at Hull that at the start they probably would have expected to win. But after Joe Rodon's red card, they were relatively solid defensively. Hull didn't have a shot on target, but that doesn't quite tell the full picture. If you have seen Adama Traore's miss already, you'll probably still be wondering how he missed it. It was a great opportunity. Let's call it a clear-cut one. And they should have taken the 3 points against Leeds. But Leeds, to be fair, for the most part, resolute and still a threat with 10 men. They obviously took the likes of Pirro off after the red card, and that first half knocked to Nonso is something they've got to be wary of. But I would expect Leeds to have a bit too much here because Watford, I mean, let's be honest, they're unpredictable. That's the beauty of the Championship. For Leeds United, I think they'll have too much now. With 11 on the pitch, with a fully fit team, and with Ellen Road cheering them on, I'm going for Leeds United to win this by 2-0. As we move on to two sides who probably produced 2 of the most impressive performances in midweek, it is Leicester City versus Bristol City. Leicester went to Norwich, and if we're being honest about it, they made it look pretty comfortable at times. They were clinical, they were ruthless, they did create the better chances, including the penalty, of course. And I know Norwich are a little bit more toothless now without Josh Sargent, but they did their job and they were professional, which, again, a bit like the Southampton game, they're starting to adapt tactically, so I might have to give Maresca credit and say he's learning from that awful stint at Parma. For Bristol City, I don't think many of us saw that coming. I know that Plymouth give up and create chances, but in this game, Bristol City gave up the ball, hit on the counter, and while it doesn't tell the full story of the game, Plymouth had some good chances on the counter. Bristol City were ruthless, they looked a threat when they were going forward, and they produced a really good win, so you can only give them credit. 2 early goals obviously got the place confident. Harry Cornick rounded it off late on. Gets a little bit of criticism from the Bristol City fans, but trust me on this one, if you persist with him, he'll do the job for you. He works his backside off, and a really comfortable win, which makes this a little harder to predict. 3 unbeaten for Bristol City. Leicester have only had that blip in the road against Hull, but most of their wins until the last 2 had been fairly narrow. I think it will go back to that this time. But Bristol City, just because they gave up a few good chances, I feel Leicester will take them. I'm going to go for a narrow win for the Foxes, again, as they were at the start of the season, by 2-1. Let's move on to a battle of 2 managers under a bit of pressure. It is Michael Carrick's Middlesbrough against Southampton, led by Russell Martin. Now, Middlesbrough were unable to get their first win of the season. They stay at the bottom of the Championship after a 1-1 draw at Sheffield Wednesday. It wasn't the highest quality game. Borough obviously had a lot of the ball. They had a couple more chances, but Sheffield Wednesday had a couple of clear-cut ones and they did miss one great opportunity. So it is a little bit hard to say that Borough have made real progress, but to only concede 1 defensively probably is progress from where they've been in recent weeks, in truth, after conceding 8 in the previous 3 Championship games. The same can probably be said for Southampton. 1-0 defeat at home to Ipswich. Again, I'm not sure about the setup and the style of playing, but not just that. The fact that Martin's solution to a couple of games where they conceded tons of goals was to bring in another attack-minded midfielder, but they were definitely better than the previous games. They didn't create many great openings, but they had a lot of the ball. They did what you'd expect, and confidence is low there at the minute. They just need to pick up a result. Away at Borough, you would argue, is a great opportunity. But if there's ever a game where I'm going to sit on the fence with a Championship's favourite scoreline, in a weekend where I couldn't find a case for many, I'm afraid it had to be this one. I'm going for Middlesbrough 1, Southampton 1, and both sides, just at the moment, don't look like they know where the next win's coming from. Let's move on to the sides that were victims of the two great performances I mentioned a couple of games ago. It is Plymouth Argyle versus Norwich City. Plymouth, of course, beaten heavily at Bristol City, didn't take chances and gave away a few too many good ones, but that has largely been the story of Plymouth season. Lots of goals for and against, and a clean sheet they kept against Blackburn, Lord knows how, because there were some great chances for the visitors. For Norwich, a disappointing display against Leicester. No more than one goal in any game since Josh Sargent got injured, and it doesn't quite look the same. Definitely a bit less rotation option up front. Definitely a little bit less cohesion up there. And of course, Sargent has been the main talisman for a year now. He took it over from Pukki early last season. I do worry about that a bit, particularly with my prediction for them to be up there. And against Leicester, they did look a little toothless. For this game, I know they're going to get chances against Plymouth, and we know it's going to be a pretty entertaining game to watch as a neutral. I have gone for Norwich to edge it just, probably based on my pre-season prediction, more than my head based on the two games. But I just feel Plymouth will give up more chances, and if Norwich can start taking them, they'll nick this by 2-1. Let's move on to a game that already looks big at both ends of the table. It is 21st place Rotherham United against top of the table unbeaten Preston. Preston continued their run, a brilliant run of wins, a 6 in a row with a 2-1 against Birmingham. Came from behind, showed that bit of grit. And again, without being spectacular, without creating lots of chances, they got a win. They were efficient. They look okay at the back. They can deal with pressure a little bit. They can trust their shape and force sides into shots from distance. And they've always got a threat on the counter. I mean, Preston are a good championship side. And I've seen Luton under Nathan Jones a couple of years ago get to the playoffs on the strength of that. So you have to say Ryan Lowe is playing to their strengths and give him credit. On the flip side of that, they're coming up against a Rotherham side who are going to be so dependent on their home form this year. Away to Huddersfield and Millwall, they look so poor defensively on the road. They're conceding 2s, 3s, 4s, even a 6 in the cup as well. And you just don't know where an away point is coming from. They've almost caught Southampton's defensive record overall. But at home, last time against Norwich, they were brilliant. And against Leicester, they were solid. They gave it a good go. So it does give us a little more jeopardy going into this one, and it does make me worry. And I feel like we're going to get a surprise. I got caught out by the Norwich one for not predicting it. So I'm going to stick my neck on the line with the only other time I've gone for this score today, the Championship's favourite scoreline of 1-1. I know I'm going to look silly if Preston get their inevitable win. It's where most of you beat me in the predictions in midweek, because you got the 2-1 score rather than my 1-0. I've just got a funny feeling that Rotherham will nick something, so I'm going to go for 1 goal apiece. Let's move on to another huge game in the bottom three. Swansea City versus Sheffield Wednesday. Swansea have had a pretty dismal week, haven't they? Completely outplayed and outfought in a derby against Cardiff on Saturday night. And then the hammer blow of a 92nd minute equaliser from QPR, followed by a 98th minute red card. It has not been a good week for Michael Duff. But they play against another side that are yet to win this year. Sheffield Wednesday did get a draw against Borough, and it is now 2 points in the last 3 games. But I don't really know where to go with this one, because Swansea have been pretty brittle defensively. I mean, they've let in 8 goals in the last 5 championship games, and to be fair, they've put in 4 at the other end. It's not been a disaster on that front. For Sheffield Wednesday, 3 blanks in the last 5 league games. But on the flip side of that, the Cardiff game is the only time they conceded more than 1. So Xisco's definitely starting to get his defensive message across, and maybe he's adapting and seeing how he's going to have to play to try and keep this team up. But against Swansea, I just wonder if we're going to get a scrappy, ugly 1-0 for one of the teams. It wouldn't shock me if this goes either way, and it is pretty much a flip of the coin. But I am going to go for Swansea to bounce back and nick it. Despite the late red card and crumbling against QPR, I'm going to go for Swansea 1, Sheffield Wednesday 0. But nothing against either side. I wouldn't be shocked if it were the other way round. Let's go and move on to the final Saturday afternoon game, which is West Bromwich Albion versus Millwall. A comprehensive Millwall win against Rotherham United, and that 93rd minute goal from Tom Bradshaw ruining my perfect score. But good to see a couple of the regulars getting in and amongst it. Him and Zian Fleming, 2 of the stars of last year. They're going to need to produce a few more performances like that, but we've not really seen too many signs of it away from home this year. It was a dominant display, but at home to Rotherham, how much can you read into it with respect this season? For West Brom, we mentioned already that crazy start against Watford, 2-2 within 25 minutes. And after that, it was a fairly cautious and pretty poor game actually, to be honest. But just a shame that defensively West Brom aren't there. And they just seem to be that side at the moment that can't do both. They're either defensively solid and then not got a lot going forward, as we saw against Bristol City, or they're what we saw against Borough and Watford, which is flying forward, creating chances galore, but then very susceptible to the counter. We saw it against Swansea as well, didn't we? So on this occasion, I feel at home West Brom are going to come out a bit. I do feel that there's a chance they could win this game. It's been an interesting start. Two of the hardest teams to predict based on their first 7 games. Millwall away from home, they've had a couple of hard-fought draws, a couple of pretty comfortable defeats like the Norwich game. Where do we go with it? I'm going to go for West Brom to nick it. It's a very tricky one to call again. I'm going to go for West Brom to nick this by 2-1. If it were the other way round, if it was at the Den, I'd be going for a Millwall win. 3 to go then, and we start with a Sunday lunchtime TV game. Probably not the most appealing on paper. It is Stoke City versus Hull City. Hull unable to break down 10-man leads for the last half an hour in a 0-0 draw, albeit we mentioned that miss from Adama Traore, right? One of those things. It happens to anyone at some point. 3 draws in 4 and a win at Leicester in between. I mean, you've got to put a bit of perspective into this. The last 5 games, they've won away at Blackburn and Leicester. They've drawn at home to Leeds and Coventry. And Bristol City are doing all right as well. So it's not a bad run of results, but a few of those draws have probably got to turn into wins. They're still clinging on to that playoff place. And Stoke, yes, they got a 2-2 draw at Huddersfield to spoil Neil Warnock's leaving party. But let's be fair about it. It's not been a good run for them in recent weeks. They did have a number of shots in that game. It was a pretty open one in fairness. And very weird watching a Stoke side have 2/3 of the ball. But overall, the message to take away from it for Stoke, particularly on the road this season, is a few too many little defensive frailties. I'm not sure they've got enough to get back to winning ways on this one. I am going to back them to get a rare clean sheet though. They haven't had one since the Watford game on the 3rd weekend of the season. I'm going to go for a 0-0 draw here. I know I said with West Brom in midweek, it's unlikely teams will produce 2 in a row, but Hull away from home here probably will try for a more solid setup. And I think both sides will cancel each other out. 0-0 or 1-0 either way at best. So after telling you Sky have picked the wrong game in what will probably now be thriller of the weekend, we move on to Sunderland versus Cardiff City, and both sides, well, they're getting on a roll, aren't they? Cardiff have won 3 and 4, including crucial home games against Sheffield Wednesday and Swansea, both expected to be in that bottom third this year. Yes, the disappointment of throwing the Ipswich game away. You've got to be fair, they've bounced back, and I did not expect them to beat Coventry in the week. A really good response to being pegged back before half-time there, and they're starting to show signs of being a decent side. Let's not be fooled though. 3 shots on target, 3 goals. They didn't have much of the ball, which no problem at all. I don't mind sides not having possession. But there are going to be plenty of days where they draw a blank doing that. In a couple of games this season, they've relied on screamers, set pieces, whatever. And if you can consistently do them great. And they have got players in the team capable of it. But you do feel away from home, they're probably going to come unstuck a few times too often. For Sunderland, they are flying. They're the form team the last 3 games. 11 scored, 2 against. Another comfortable win away at Blackburn, who we've mentioned already. Blackburn have wasted chances against most teams. But let's focus on the positives for Sunderland going forward. Tony Mowbray has got that side looking such a threat on the break. We saw it firsthand with Luton last year on 4 occasions. And while they didn't have the best chances in the game, they certainly looked brilliant on the counter. And for Sunderland, with a good young side that's just starting to knit together after those attacking changes in the summer, very excited to see what they've got in store. Whether they can stay consistent enough, I'm not too sure. I'm going to go for Sunderland to nick it by 2-1. And let's move on to Monday night and the final game of the match day as Huddersfield Town begin life without Neil Warnock in a trip to Coventry City. They finished off with a 2-2 draw against Stoke, and in fairness, we're probably going to have our first manager special of the season tomorrow. So Huddersfield fans, keep your eyes peeled. Once the announcement is confirmed, we'll have a video here, probably on Friday afternoon. But for a moment, it looked like Stoke had spoilt his party as he went to leave. I'm glad in a way he got that equaliser in the end. Good to see Matty Pearson scoring again too. The former Luton man was on fire when Warnock first came in last year in front of goal. And Jack Radoni is now starting to find it with regularity too. They're definitely performing well now, up to 8 points. And do you know what? Not a bad start to the season in truth. So good results for them. It's now 3 unbeaten in the league. For Coventry, well, it depends which way you look at it. It's no win in 5. 4 of those in a row were draws. The defeat at Cardiff will have been very frustrating. Was a nothing game in truth. 3 shots on target each. Coventry had a lot of the ball, which isn't always like them away from home. And Cardiff just took advantage of some poor defending. It's a very unfortunate situation, but Coventry haven't quite clicked yet. Now, I'm not going to write them off because we saw last season with all the debacle with the stadium and their poor form away from home. They just didn't get started. On this occasion, they're doing far better. We'll have to wait and see if they can pick up. Whether they'll do so on this occasion, it's hard to tell not knowing which manager's going to be in at Huddersfield at the time of recording. I do think that almost it's going to go the other way to a normal new manager bounce where Neil Warnock is clearly loved at Huddersfield. The fans were right behind him. We know the reason he's going because they're looking for a longer term appointment under the new ownership. But he did a wonderful job there and that should be reflected on, which we will in a manager special. I almost feel as a result of that, we might see a bit of a lull rather than a manager bounce before the picking up afterwards. So I'm going to go for Coventry City to pick up just their second win of the season. And like their first one against Borough at home, I'm going to go pretty comfortable. I'm going to finish the match day with a fairly big score of Coventry City 3, Huddersfield Town 1. And with that done, let's have a quick recap of what I've predicted for this weekend's action. It's spread over 4 days, but I've got 2 3-1 home wins across the weekend. Ipswich to beat Blackburn 3-1 at Portman Road, and Coventry to spoil the new Huddersfield managers party with the same scoreline on Monday night. I've gone for a bold 0-0 between Stoke and Hull on TV, so you all want to be watching that. It's probably going to be a thriller. And 2 Championship's favourite scorelines, 1 in the under pressure manager game between Borough and Southampton, and 1, surprisingly, between relegation threatened Rotherham and top of the table Preston. Those are just my scores though. Do you agree or disagree? Let me know down in the comments below. Give me your score predictions for match day 8, and if you beat me or match my score, you'll get a shout out at the start of the next recap. We've got a week off as the EFL Cup returns in midweek. We'll probably have a Huddersfield manager special tomorrow, so keep your eyes peeled for that. Thank you for continuing to play along in your numbers. We really do appreciate it. If you want to stay up to date and make sure you don't miss anything, subscribe and turn that notification bell on. Predictions for the Premier League and League One this weekend are both up in the eye above. And I'll see you back here for match day 9 next week, but probably for Huddersfield Town's manager special tomorrow.